welcome to another episode of Little Give. I'm so excited to introduce you to Mary Beth. Mary Beth, tell us where you're from, what you're all about.
So I'm actually from Central Jersey, although I currently live in the Bay Area, San Francisco Bay Area. I came to Berkeley for college and I just never left. So basically the short answer for that. But for me, I'm really in the substance use recovery space. I had a really abusive childhood. Therefore, as a result, common as is common, I picked up drugs at an early age. I was shooting meth by 17 and full bore addiction in high school. And I really had a hard run for quite a long time. I didn't get sober till 32. But to give the short overview, when I got sober and also had to deal with my PTSD and trauma from a lot of violence, eventually I rebuilt myself professionally. I attended law school 6 years into recovery, and at 20 years, I was appointed a federal judge. So I call my story From Junkie to Judge, one woman's triumph over trauma and addiction. But there's a lot of details in there, but that's sort of the big arc.
Oh, well, I love the fact that you're able to share your story of taking pain and turning it into purpose. And that's something I really love to share on this show. So talk a little bit about that, where how you ended up in the situation. I myself grew up in generational poverty and had some major struggles as well with violence, all the things. And I want to hear more about your story of how you went through and grew through all of that and to where you got now. So tell us a bit about your past.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly wouldn't want anyone to go through what I went through. And it was physical abuse as a child, sexual abuse, really emotional neglect. I had several sexual assaults as a teenager. So there was a lot of, and I moved in with a violent boyfriend for a while. So a lot of different forms of violence. And definitely that derailed me. We know that when things happen when you're young, it really impacts brain development, it impacts choices. But eventually, once I got sober and started to sort of reconnect to my true self and build my life back up, not just professionally, but, my relationships, being able to be a good wife and a good aunt, and my behavior, improving my behavior, which was more problematic than I realized when I got sober. All of those things were part of the development. And then it was also about being of service to my community. And so today, as a retired judge, I'm actually for the first time able to talk openly about my whole story. So it's really a new freedom for me. And I'm on the board for Life Brings Secular Recovery. I'm on the board for SheRecovers Foundation. I'm on the Higher Calling Foundation's Advisory Council. And I do a lot of speaking. I've got workshops that I do at conferences. I'll do keynote speeches for fundraisers for recovery organizations. I train lawyers and judges. My memoir is out, which is that From Junkie to Judge title that I gave you. And I've had opinion pieces in the Wall Street Journal and the LA Times and others. And so I do all this now as sort of my part-time retirement life. And it's really rewarding to be able to be of service and to be productive in a new way at this point.
I love how you said that you took it from, now you're at freedom where you can tell your story without any worry about if it's going to affect your life or your, role as a judge or your role as a pillar of the community. It's so incredible to me when I hear these stories of people who are able to just share. There's so many people out there who need to hear your story, who resonate with it, who want to get from where they are right now to where you are right now. And so the fact that you're able to express this and share that is just so special. And I am grateful that you brought it on the show today. So back in the day, whenever you had gone through all of these struggles and trials and tribulations and all of the things, what was it that really got you thinking about how you could move the needle a little bit in your favor to get to the next step?
For me, like for many of us that go into recovery, it's not that sort of light bulb big event that you see on television. Sometimes it is. Sometimes it's a DUI or someone loses custody of their children. But a lot of times it's the same as it was for me, which is a cumulative process. And so by 32, I had been using drugs for 20 years. I really had been in an addiction, which today we call substance use disorder. I had been in that phase for about 15 years. And I was just emotionally exhausted. I was, debilitated. I felt trapped. I was having physical problems. I could not hold a job. I could not hold a job. And my partner was going to throw me out. And so it was really all of those things in combination and just sheer exhaustion that caused me to finally say, well, maybe I ought to go to rehab. And that was the first step in the process.
Hi, my name is Justin Clark, and I'm the president of the board of directors for Driving Single Parents, a 501c3 nonprofit serving the citizens of San Antonio and Bexar County, Texas. I'm here today to tell you a little bit about the great work that our organization is doing for the citizens of San Antonio. What you're about to see is just a few photos and videos of the way that we're changing lives for single parents in and around San Antonio, Texas. Our first giveaway took place in April of 2017, just one short month after the formation of our organization. John, a Bexar County resident, was the victim of a horrible drunk driver incident. He and his daughter survived the crash, and we were so proud to give our first car to this deserving family. Fast forward to 2020, a very difficult year for nonprofits. We were able to secure 4 vehicles for single parents in need. Our organization, including our board of directors, list of partners, and portfolio of people we've been able to help in San Antonio, continues to grow, and it's all thanks to donors and local community organizations that have helped us along the way. This giveaway took place in 2021 and shows that we continue to help single parents even after the struggles brought about by COVID-19. Because of limited funds and the overwhelming need, we at Driving Single Parents are incredibly selective with the people we help. Some are victims of domestic violence. Others had a spouse pass away tragically or otherwise fell on hard times. These single parents show adversity in the face of challenge and aren't looking for a handout. We offer a hand up and help get them back in the driver's seat. Many of the single parents we help go on to graduate college, get promotions, get married, mentor others, and some have even been so touched by the gift we gave them that they have decided to join our board of directors to pay it forward and ensure the continued growth of our organization. If you would like to help our organization continue to grow and continue to help single parents in need in San Antonio, Texas, and Bexar County, Texas, we would really appreciate your support. Please visit us online at www.drivingsingleparents.org. Thank you.
And so to have the thought of, I need help and maybe I should get some help, maybe I should go to rehab. That's kind of, it seems so easy to think about, like, maybe I should just go to rehab, but that's not an easy process, right? So tell us a bit about your journey of okay, you think I need help. I need to ask for help. How did you actually, get yourself to the help that you required?
It's a good question, because a lot of times when there's sort of policy discussions about drugs, I think there's this sort of underlying assumption that in the US, we have a system of readily accessible, affordable treatment for everyone. And it's just not true. It wasn't true when I got sober in 93 when I went to rehab. My sober date is January 94. I just had 30 years. But it's still not true today. And so when I was trying to find rehab, I had no insurance and I didn't have any money. And so I had to call around to a lot of places to try to find some place that would take me. And eventually, after weeks of trying, maybe even 6 weeks of trying, I found a women's program in a city not far away that would put me on the wait list. And I was on the wait list for 10 weeks. I had to call every Monday between 9 and noon for 10 weeks, or my name would drop to the bottom of the list again. And that's a hard thing to do when you're in the middle of active addiction. And I had the benefit of living in a stable household with a telephone, and not everyone that needs help has that. And so it was definitely a bit of a struggle to even find a treatment option for me because I didn't have financial means.
Oh my goodness. I could not love this conversation more than I do right this moment, because that right there, what you just said, the sheer will that you had to do that every day. not everyone has that. Not everyone has the ability to, like you said, call or ask for help or continually stay on top of staying on that waiting list, all the things that you had to do. I think that's one of the things we need to really fix in our society, is that there's not something readily available for somebody who says, I need help right now. And it's not something that's available currently that I know of. Do you know of any resources that if somebody's out there struggling with addiction or whatever they're struggling with, that they can actually access that's more readily available than what you had back in 93?
Well, so it's going to depend on what state you're in, because, for example, what type of medical benefits are available for you are really state by state specific. The number of treatment facilities that are low cost are also very locally specific. But the one, and also I'll say there are a number of treatment options, right? So most people are familiar with those like 28-day or 30-day inpatient programs, and I did a 90-day inpatient. But that's not the only option. There are other options like intensive outpatient, which is like 3 nights a week, so you can live at home and have a job. There are some therapists and doctors who are actually trained in addiction today. But if all else fails, if you have no other option, the one option that is readily available for everyone is peer support. And peer support groups are groups like 12 Steps, which is Alcoholics Anonymous and Narcotics Anonymous and all the anonymouses, but also the groups like I'm on the board for Life-Bringing Cycle Recovery, SheRecovers Foundation. There are other options. And so if there's nothing else, people can either in their local community and or online access peer support. And that is sometimes the only help that people have access to.
Oh, and that's such a hard thing. And it's so good that you were able to stay on top of that, and you were able to, call every day and do the things that you had to do to get yourself into recovery. Tell us a little bit about that recovery process. I know that had to be terrifying for you when you first started it. Talk to the audience a little bit about the coping mechanisms you used and what that process was like for you.
I mean, you're right. It is very scary when you're starting to take those first steps into recovery and starting to think about stopping drug use, because it's been a pain management tool. That's what substance use is for most of us. It's the pain management tool, and or it's a mental health symptom reducer. That's usually what's underneath. And so for me, I was worried. I was afraid. What are they going to ask of me? Am I going to be up to this? I really didn't think I could get sober. That was sort of beyond my imagination. But I thought, well, maybe I can figure out how to do better, how to do less. But also when I got to treatment, it turned out what they were offering me wasn't the best fit. So they were insisting that the only option was the 12-step option. And that's a good fit for a lot of people, but not for me. And so what I ended up doing was sort of taking responsibility for building my recovery plan. Today, we call it a personal recovery plan in Life-Bring. And I really just sort of, I was looking for all the ideas I could find and synthesizing them. Every time I read the AA Big Book, or I read the Life-Bring's Parents book, or I went to a meeting, I was always looking for strategies and techniques and ideas that other people use successfully, and then thinking about, is this a good fit for me? Is this a good technique that I can apply? So I read myself sort of as, it was my job to be open-minded and to keep my ears open and to look for all the different suggestions I could gather. But also it was my job to filter them and build a program that I thought would work for me. And that's sort of how I tackled it.
Oh, I think that's just incredible that you had that foresight to think of all these things. There's probably somebody out there who says, well, that worked for her, but how is somebody supposed to know that they need to be thinking about all of the things you thought about? If you're in a recovery program and it's not working for you, it's so easy for somebody who's struggling with recovery to say, oh yeah, see, it doesn't work for me. Or, oh, this program is no good, or I can't do this, or I'm not able to stay sober. Can you tell the audience a little bit about how it is that your personality really got you to a place where you were able to see ahead of all of those curveballs that were thrown at you the entire time?
I mean, it sounds easier because it's 30 years ago, but at the moment, it was really frightening because the experts were telling me to do something. They were, I mean, adamant and vehement that I had to do it. They told me I was going to fail if I did it the way that I thought was right for me. And that was really frightening because I knew that I had been using drugs for 20 years and my mind was a bit foggy still. And I wasn't sure if I could trust my own judgment. So it was challenging for me as well. But I will say that when I got sober, there was no internet, right? And so when I got home from rehab and started thinking about, are there really other options? I actually had to go to the library to do the research. But the good news is that today you can actually do a Google, a group. Peer support groups this other than 12 steps. What are alternatives to 12 steps? Things like that. And you can find them online now. So the research is a lot easier. But also when I got sober in 94, I didn't know anyone who had built a personal plan, but it's more common today. And it's a fundamental pillar of LifeBring. And it's really a fundamental pillar of SheRecovers as well. So the idea that it's not one size fits all, that what works for you will be different than what works for me. That is a bit more broadly understood today than when I got sober. But also my memoir, one of the reasons I wrote it was to give an example of building an individual plan. Because 30% of my memoir is about my first 3 years of recovery. And it really goes through what I was thinking, how I was approaching it, the strategies that I used, just not that I should be copied exactly, but as an example of the process to build a plan that'll work for you.
Hi, my name is Andrew Fraley, and I believe that sometimes we all need a little bit of help. If you're in the San Antonio community and you need some legal help, call me at 210-725-4658.
That's so beautiful. I want to talk more about this and how it is that, of course, you decided, obviously, all the things you've accomplished. You could have said, you know what, I'm done. Like, that's it. I've gone from this stage of my life to like, now I'm a judge and now I'm retired and like, that's it, I'm good. But you decided to go a little different and actually share your story. And what is it about, you that made you want to do that?
Well, I will say I am a person who likes the next challenge, right? I mean, even writing the memoir was a challenge. I was an excellent legal writer, but it turns out that writing memoir is a completely different skill set. Like, it's written like a novel, first of all, right? And so I like the next challenge. And this work, I really thought about, did I have something to add to the recovery space? And I am a good example of what we today call multiple pathways of recovery, a personal recovery plan, but also of the interplay between trauma and mental health, because I had PTSD, which for me showed up mostly as severe anxiety, mental health recovery, and many people, when they get sober, they actually have trauma or another mental health condition to work on. And so I really thought that I could add something to the conversation. And I'll be honest, that judge title, it's just a tool that I use because it helps people open their ears a little bit so I can share information that I think is important. But I enjoy the writing. I enjoy the speaking. I enjoy speaking with people like you and having these kind of conversations. People can message me at my website, which is here, junkietojudge.com. I answer all messages. So it's emotionally rewarding, but it's also intellectually stimulating to be doing this work.
Oh, I agree. I just think it's just incredible that you've taken your pain and turned to purpose and in so many different ways. There's people out there who are struggling through all the things you said. You've talked about so far, your depression or PTSD or potentially, an addiction, all the different things. And like, that's something that each and every one of us have the potential to be struggling with. And it's okay to talk about it. And it's okay to ask for help. And I love the fact that you're not only willing to have asked for help yourself, but also like put this in a way where other people can get that help from you. Can you give the audience your number, like one message on how, if they're struggling with one of those things, how they can feel better in their day-to-day? Is there like a little tip you could give?
I guess for me, one of the key parts of my recovery was the idea of, I call it patience and persistence, right? I mean, I got sober at 32, and I felt like I had wasted my life, which I mean, I had a Berkeley degree and good grades, and I couldn't hold a word processing job. That's where I was. But also I was just, emotionally so devastated. I had screwed up most of my relationships. All of that devastation was around me. And I wanted to rush ahead. Like, let me heal this now. Let's get well within a year, but it just wasn't the way the process works, and it wasn't realistic. And I really had to sort of rein myself in and focus on being patient and being persistent. And so for newcomers, I really emphasize that. The main thing isn't, where will I be in 2 years or 5 years when you're newly entering recovery? It's really, I think, about looking at what you need to work on, what areas of your life you need to fix, and then prioritizing them. And then building, what's my first goal in this area? What's my first plan to reach that first goal? And then you implement it. And now you can set goal number 2, and what's the plan? And let me implement. And eventually you can work on other things than your first list of priorities, because you've improved in those areas. And so now you can tackle something else. And so I really think those two, that intertwined ideas of patience and persistence, are really key to building through that early process, to build a solid plan and to start moving forward.
I think it's fantastic advice, especially with nowadays. It feels kind of like everybody's like in this microwave generation where they think, oh, you put the pizza in the oven or in the microwave and it's done in 3 seconds. And when that doesn't happen, they're frustrated. So just like everything else in life, you have to be patient and realize that these things take time. It's not something you can just magic snap and say, I'm going to be sober in a year, or I'm going to be 100% my best self in 10 years. You can't do that. You can't put unrealistic timelines on yourself. And you really have to like grow through and go through the journey to be able to get to where you want to be, whether it's to be sober or, not feel depressed anymore, or whatever it is you're struggling with, PTSD, all the things you have to grow with those things. Is that a little bit of what you're saying?
That's true. And the other thing is that in your early sobriety, if you take that approach, it turns out that it's really building up your skill set, right? I mean, I really felt like taking charge of my recovery, prioritizing what I was going to work on, building those initial goals, creating the plan, carrying them out. That really made me feel more confident and more competent that I could handle my life. I mean, don't get me wrong, not perfectly. I mean, I made mistakes. We all make mistakes in our recovery, but that I was gaining confidence in my ability to move myself forward step by step, and that helped ease some of the stress and anxiety of feeling like I had just lost the first 32 years of my life, and now I needed to sort of make up for it.
Absolutely. And that's something I really tried to show in my journey is like, there's always something going on beyond the smile. You're a judge, you're on the bench, you're, in charge of people's lives at that moment, and you're doing the best you can to make sure justice is served. But you always had something going on beyond that smile your whole life, whether you were 32 years old or 62 years old or whatever age you're ever going to be. It's always something we're all going through or growing through. And so I love the fact that you're willing to like peel back the layers and show the world that, hey, there's more to this beautiful face than just that beautiful smile I put on every day. So I'm grateful that you're willing to share that, because not a lot of people are.
Yeah, and the truth is, it can be hard for people to be honest about being in recovery from a substance use disorder, because people worry. There's still a lot of stigma attached. I think in the U.S. we go back and forth between agreeing that it's a disease and then yet judging people because they have this medical condition, and so it is challenging for people to be public and to be open. I mean, my first big public announcement was I had an opinion piece in the Wall Street Journal where I acknowledged challenge being a former judge and a former meth addict. And, as I say, once you announce that in the Wall Street Journal, there's no turning back, right? But it is a big decision for people who they tell, when they tell them, and especially on the professional side. So it's understandable that not everyone's able to be as open as I now can be. And it's part of the reason I felt it was important for me to speak.
So important. We're so grateful that you're willing to do so. I want to ask you the two questions I ask all of my guests. So the first one is, can you give the audience an example of a little thing that they can do in their community that might be just a little give on their end, but might make a big impact on the other side?
Well, I mean, in relation to substance use disorders, I would say that anytime that you learn of someone who has an addiction that they're struggling with, or that you meet a family member who has someone in their family that's struggling, just do your best to approach it from a place of empathy, from a place of understanding, from a place of kindness, because it really is, it's a mental health condition, and the person struggling is not out partying or having fun. It's a miserable place to be, and it has a lot of negative effect on their family members as well. So, empathy, kindness in those situations, I think goes a long way.
Those are fantastic tools for somebody to use in their day-to-day. Thank you so much. Can you give the audience an example of a time in your life where maybe somebody did something little for you that might have been, a little give on their end, but really made a big impact on you and in your life?
Well, I will say the thing that comes to mind, and it wasn't that small, but my partner now, and I will say now my husband, who was ready to throw me out. When in rehab, you have these family sessions where your family members come, and he would come and he told the counselor, I think it's too late. She's burned too many bridges. I'm too angry. And the little thing that he did was, when I got out of rehab, he let me come back to the house. He wasn't making any commitments. He was literally just saying, you are allowed to live here for a little while. But that was opening the door for him to see my improvement and for him to start to think about maybe we could rebuild the relationship, which is what we did.
Oh, that's a beautiful story. That could be just that one little thing that just lets somebody see that you have the intention to really get to a new place. So thank you so much for sharing all of that. Obviously, this show's about nonprofits as well. We love to highlight nonprofits. So are there any nonprofits you're excited about?
I mean, I'm on the board for SheRecovers Foundation, but today I was going to emphasize LifeRing Secular Recovery, which is a peer support group. So, we have, just like you see on TV, we have meetings, we sit around in a circle, or today on Zoom, right? There are also a lot of meetings on Zoom. And LifeRing's focus is on what we call self-empowered recovery. So it's that personal recovery plan where we believe, you are a unique individual and your plan will be different than mine, but we have the group in the meetings are there to help you build a strong recovery plan, but also we have a workbook that will help you with that. And we even have workbook meetings where you can do it as part of a group. And so it's a more individualized approach, and it's a more self-empowered approach. And a lot of people are very comfortable with that. Also, the meeting format is not about your past, it's about what's going on today. And so you talk about current challenges and current successes, and that can also be a real help to making sure your plan is robust and that you're moving forward.
I love it. Thank you for sharing that. We briefly touched on your book and the things that you're working on. Talk a little bit more about your book and why you're so excited about sharing it with the world.
I mean, I really thought a lot about the structure of my memoir, because I did actually read memoir once I thought about writing a book. And I realized that a lot of them don't talk about where the addiction came from. And so I really wanted to include that. And so the first third of the book is really showing why it made sense to me to use drugs excessively as a young teenager. And then I do have the usual, drug history stories. But as I said, 30% of it is about recovery, because I wanted the book to be useful and I wanted it to be an example of that individualized approach. Plus, at the end, I have checklists and guidelines that are helpful for people struggling or their families. So I really tried to structure in a way that it was going to add value.
Oh, I love that. Would you mind sharing a little tidbit of that with the audience as to where this addiction started at? Because I think that's really important.
I mean, so because of the child abuse and the sexual abuse in the house that I had, I had PTSD and I didn't know it. And I had really severe anxiety. And that is very common. I mean, there's a test you can take called Adverse Childhood Experiences. And if you have an ACE score of 4, your odds of developing an addiction are 3 times higher than the general population. And my ACE score is 7. So it was really high odds. And part of what I do want, your listeners and America in general to better understand is the connection between mental health, untreated mental health conditions and or trauma and substance use disorder. There's a very strong correlation. And when people get sober, they often have to address both sides if they're going to be able to maintain their sobriety. But even knowing that, I hope will also increase that understanding, increase that empathy, increase willingness to help.
Oh, I think that's so important. And that's the whole trigger point, is like correlating the two of like mental health with addiction. It's not just somebody wakes up in the morning and says, I'd love to be today a meth addict. It's not something anybody ever intends to be. And I think that's so important to share, is that there's some kind of pain management, like you mentioned earlier, that's happening where somebody feels like this pain is so great that I can't overcome it. So I have to this or that. And then that becomes such a pain point that really can affect somebody's mental health in such a great way. So I love that you're sharing all these things. Do you have any, parting advice that you could give somebody out there who's currently really maybe struggling with, whether it be mental health, depression, or PTSD, or drug addiction, or alcohol addiction? Can you give some advice?
Well, one thing we haven't talked about is what friends and family can do. And that's a question that I get asked a lot. And so for friends and family, the current recommendation is not that tough love idea, which is actually doesn't have good evidence. In fact, has poor evidence. But today it's CRAFT. It's called Community Reinforcement and Family Training. And it's more of a positive reinforcement approach. But also there's a really excellent book and workbook that's based on CRAFT, and it's called Beyond Addiction. And it's available on Amazon and all the usual sites, just like my book is available on Amazon and all the usual sites. But Beyond Addiction is a good explanation of what substance use disorder is, why it's so hard to change, but also practical techniques about what friends and family can do and what actually they shouldn't be doing. And so that is a really good tool. And that's a question that I often get asked. How can friends and family help?
Oh, I think that's great advice. Such great advice. I've loved having you on today. If somebody out there was listening to the story and they wanted to learn more about you and all you do, maybe get your book, why don't you give them all the details how they can get in touch?
Yes. So the book, again, is From Junkie to Judge, One Woman's Triumph Over Trauma and Addiction, available on Amazon and all the usual sites, and bookstores have it or can get it. My website, junkietoJudge.com. There's a lot of information about me. My opinion pieces are there, and you can always message me through my website, and I answer every message. And then I am on X, Twitter. And I will say I don't spend time arguing with people on Twitter, but I do, as I did here today, try to provide information. So I'll provide new studies that come out, articles, and my recovery thoughts. So if that's of interest, I'm at Mary Beth O _.
Thank you so much for sharing all the information. And if anybody out there is listening today and they want more, she told you all the ways to reach her and find out more about her and everything that she does. If you want to know more about that nonprofit that she featured today, please go find out more on their website. And if you are passionate about it, please donate $1 or $5 can make a huge impact to these nonprofits. So let's keep the kindness going, and let's keep supporting those around us who are maybe struggling with substance abuse or PTSD or depression or all the things. Let's make sure we wrap our arms around them. And we also spend the time to go and check out the books like Mary Beth just described that can help you understand a little bit more. Thank you all so much for watching. And Mary Beth, thank you so much for being on today. It meant a lot to me to hear more about you and your insight. And I can't wait to read your book.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you so much for watching this episode of Little Give. If you would like to learn more about how I highlight ordinary people doing extraordinary things to help others, or maybe you'd like to be a guest, or maybe you know a nonprofit that you would like to see featured on a future episode of Little Give, you can find all the information on our website at littlegive.com. If you'd like to get involved with our kindness clip segment, please do send in those videos. Send them via email to cindy@littlegive.com, or you can tag us on any social media under Cindy Witteman or #LittleGive. If you'd like to know more about our podcast, you can also find us on all major streaming platforms under Little Give Podcast. Please do find our Facebook group under Little Give TV Show and join it. We'd love to keep you up to date with future episodes. Thank you all so much for watching, and I can't wait to highlight the next ordinary person doing extraordinary things to help others. See you next time.